There we go. Hey, y'all, this is Pete Cosby with the Heart Centered Selling Academy podcast. I thought I was recording a minute ago, and it turned out I was not. So here we go. Pardon, I think would be French, right? So I have here one of my dearest friends, Carol Miller. She is from Chicago, and we're good friends from an organization called Project Positive Change, that where we met just a few years ago from our dear friend Lee Daniel, who I now work for. And Carol has always been such a voice of joy and peace and positivity and encouragement for people. And I want to hear what type of heart-centered entrepreneurship job or business that she has, how she's serving people, and how perhaps we can be of service to her as well. Carol, how are you doing today?
I'm great. Thanks for having me. How are you?
I'm good. And I hear you're not in Chicago today.
I am currently out of the winter weather in the panhandle of Florida for another week, and then I'll be back in Chicago.
Oh, you're gonna have to give up all that snow. I just feel so terrible for
I
you.
know it's tragic for sure.
Tragique. We're going to be French today on the podcast.
Okay, we that's about as far as I can go with that.
So tell us, Carol, what is it that you do in your heart-centered business?
I do a few different things, but basically the work that I do is to help heighten people's celebrations and lessen their sorrows and struggles through focusing on what they want in their life rather than focusing on what they don't want. And when
Hmm.
the don't wants are right in front of you, it's very easy to give all your time, energy, and attention to that. So it's really about finding some compassion for yourself and going back and focusing on the things that you are striving for and the things that you yearn to create in your life.
What are you finding are people's biggest blocks to being able to just connect with that?
Well, for me, it's unworthiness,
Hmm.
and it looks different for everybody. And I personally think that one thing to know about me is I'm not an absolutist. I'm not a big always, never, right, wrong person. But I do think the majority of people, if you're not getting that desired outcome or dream that you want, there's something internal that does not believe you're worthy of it. And it may be unconscious that you were told that as a kid that you couldn't do this or that. So for me, it really ends up going back to the unworthiness and the worthiness of feeling you deserve it and the confidence building up into creating what you're wanting to live.
So, what are the clues that you have this lack of worthiness issue in you?
Many excuses on for why it can't happen because it's easier to stay in the uncomfortable parts of your life, even if it's uncomfortable, because I know even for myself, unknown and uncertainty can be something that you don't want to travel into, but it's really about knowing that you're going to be okay wherever you're at and just taking small steps forward. But I think a lot of it for me is when people are coming up with the excuse of why they can't do that, whether it's not enough time and not enough money, not enough education. We could all come up with a million reasons on why we shouldn't pursue something.
So, you think people get comfortable in the pain and in the suffering of it, and they're more scared of the uncomfortability of the unknown possibility?
Yeah. And I mean, even the suffering part, people don't even, if they've not experienced being in a place, because a lot of people, and I've done this myself, you work a job, the 9 to 5, because you need income. And you may not even be doing a job that you like, but it's still providing you a house, it's providing you food and the things that we need to survive. So I don't even think some people realize that they're not happy because they're just on autopilot and they're just doing their day every day and not realizing that it can be better than where they're at if they want it to be.
So it's like the idea of Maya Angelou of once you know better, you do better. Until you know
Yeah.
better, you can't do better.
Yeah.
Awesome. And so, are there? And I know that you're not an always or never person, but there are definitely patterns. What do you see happens for people where they start to realize that, hey, maybe there's something that they're missing out on or don't know of? Maybe there's a piece of joy that they haven't even experienced yet.
Well, I think it goes back to just like when they talk about the pipe dreams, or they're maybe in comparison and envy of other people, but that can't happen for me. So it's really about building that foundation. And I know, again, also for myself, patience is not my strength. And it's really about a daily practice of believing in yourself and building that confidence through affirmations, through celebrating the small things that are going well in your life and being gentle with yourself when things aren't going the way you want. I am all about positivity, but my idea of a positive focus is not rainbows and unicorns and puppy dogs. That would be awesome. But life is about sadness, fear, joy, happiness. It's all about all of it. So I kind of call my coaching embracing your life. So you're embracing the good parts of your life and embracing the harder parts of your life too.
And I love how you're sort of alluding to the idea that part of the magic of a coach is that because we do have this idea that it's possible for you, but not for me. But as
Right?
like a coach, they can look on the outside and they can say, "Hey, I see this as a possibility for you, a vision that perhaps they don't have for themselves," right?
Absolutely. Actually, one of my clients right now, I probably told her 15 times in the year we've been working together. I'm like, you are me like 5 or 10 years ago. The things that she says and is doing, I'm like, I have been exactly in your shoes. I think you are me. So, and I just think of, I'm a big baseball fan, and even premier athletes, they have coaches who help them tweak, their batting stance just slightly to add 15 points to their average. So, when you get outside of yourself and get that support of somebody who wants the best for you, then I find that to be helpful.
Oh, I love those incremental steps you're talking about. Just like even like an airplane is off target like 97% of
Yeah.
the time. I love that. And also,
Well, and
so
in baseball, a excellent hitter hits like 320, 330. They're not even 50% of the time accurate, but they're
mhm.
considered amazing for that. So it's really about, even I'm a big believer in reframing our challenges and seeing it from a different perspective. So rather focusing on, this is here to harm me, this is here to stop me, this is here to allow me to maybe step back and see a different way to go about it. And sometimes it means that the dream that we may have, we've changed and we don't want that anymore. And that's okay too.
Ooh, so is it like the fallacy of perfectionism?
Yeah, I guess so.
Wow.
I, I know for me, like even when I started, I have a nonprofit called Positive Focus. And when I first started and made it a nonprofit in 2009, I was tunnel vision on that's what it was going to be. It was going to be a building in Chicago. And somebody questioned that to me, like, what is your reason? And my reason is to help people feel seen and heard, because I believe when people feel seen and heard, they're less likely to harm themselves and others. And his point was, so positive focus is the only way you can do that? And I'm like, no, I could do it other ways. So it opened up to many other ideas. I work with other people, always still work on helping people, feel seen and heard, but it's not just about that one vision that I had. And the building never happened. And for a while, that was disappointing to me. But then I also realized I don't want to run a building. I want to work with people. I don't want to be that CEO who is over, 100 or 300 people and does not have connection without the outside world.
Do you find often that the people that are the perfect people to be coached are those that are the most encouraging for others?
I have not thought of it that way before, but I definitely think they're the people who seek it because they are doing that for others rather and seek it for themselves in some aspect. I'm going to have to think about that one, Pete. I've not thought of it that way before.
Yeah, because you often see that. You see some of the people that it's even, I think, why you see some people that are comics or seem so happy and then they end up doing something harmful to themselves later on.
Yeah.
It's those people that want to help others so much, but they never feed themselves. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Hmm.
And it's also the people who I've had many people tell me, you should coach my boss or my husband or my wife. You really, even those comedians, for the people who might have been close to them and were aware that they were hurting, unless you want support and help, like I would love to be able to create change for people just by doing something for them, but they have to want it and have to be able to do the work for themselves. And that's really hard when you're dealing with somebody that's a loved one. But we can't change other people, darn it.
Yeah, because all you can really do is like mirror and hold space, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm, I love that. And so, what are some techniques that people can do for themselves to understand their own value and worth?
One is awareness for me, because when you're in awareness of your feelings, then you can change. Or anger, fear, disappointment, frustration, none of those are bad feelings. It's just how much time and energy and attention do you want to give them. So sometimes when you're in that frustrated mood, or something's going on and it's frustrating you, when you're aware that you're frustrated, you get to decide, I'm going to stay here because I need to feel frustrated, or I'm going to take a step to feeling a little bit better. When you're on autopilot, frustration is leading you, life is leading you. You are not leading your life. So I think that's the first thing I would say, is to be aware of how you feel, because then you can shift, or you can stay in that space of anger, sadness, disappointment. It's not a right or wrong to be there. It's for me, I ask myself, who do I want to be and how do I want to show up in life? That is one of my go-tos when I am allowing anger or frustration or anything that doesn't feel good to me start to run the show. I don't want to be an angry person. I don't want to be a mean person or whatever. So I use that and I step back into who I want to be. And if you can repeat the question, because I'm not sure I answered it the way you
Oh,
asked it.
I think you did beautifully, and
Okay.
I love how it's like you're alluding to honoring the emotion, but not to necessarily identify with it,
Yeah. Well,
right?
and I absolutely years ago was that person. Just be happy. Life is good. Because I did not want to honor my feelings of unworthiness or sadness or whatever. I just pretended they didn't exist, and pretending there's the fake it till you make it, which I can see working in some aspects, but there's also the pretending it never happened, that you're just burying it, and most likely, not always, it's going to come up and talk to you again, because it also wants to be seen and heard.
Yeah, I guess that's the difference between optimism and toxic
Yeah.
positivity.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Which I have been accused of, being that toxic positive person, but I think it's also about being able to frame things in different ways, because for me, I've discovered that I can take anything and I can see the gift in it if I will
Right.
just give it enough space. You know what I mean?
Well, and probably people don't know any hardship that you might have gone through in your life to get to that place. So they just see you seeing the glossy aspects of life. And I don't know of anybody who hasn't had challenges and struggles. Certainly some people have had it more than others, but I suspect people who have had minimal challenges and yet the world is out to get them. And then people who have had pretty strong challenges, and they see it as maybe not a blessing, but they see it as part of growth and just part of living. So I've always found it fascinating on how people take that road, because it's nature and nurture, I would guess.
Absolutely. It's so much in the viewpoint, and what I've discovered for myself is, I've talked about this on an earlier podcast, but have you heard the term shunyata?
No.
But it's a Buddhist term that means that we understand that we are in this mix of chaos at any one moment of all
Mhm.
potential, and it's like, how do you stay mindful and present even when the good and bad, sorrow and joy, and
Yeah.
not identify with either one and not give either one any extra weight, but just to
Yes.
understand that that's like you said, that's living.
Yeah. To observe it rather than absorb it. And right
Ooh.
there, for me, that is absolutely a practice.
Mm.
Like, uh, maybe somebody can just hear that sentence and start immediately observing rather than absorbing. But I think, just even when this is something I heard years and years ago. When I first heard it, I'm like, that doesn't ring true for me. But it's, you cannot worry and love at the same time. And for me, we've been trained, you worry about your loved ones, like be safe driving the car or whatever. And worry is a way for a lot of people to show love, that you're worried about them. But it's a low energy compared to love. So when I first heard that, I'm like, that can't be true. But I think you can go from worry to love to worry to love to worry to love within, I'm really worried about my mom. I love my mom. I think you can switch back and forth pretty quickly, but you cannot maintain them at the same time. So when you get into that space of worrying about a loved one, worrying about something that's going on in your life, that's when I would step back and think about sending love instead of sending that worry energy out, send loving energy out.
Do you think that sometimes worry can be a way of controlling the other person from stepping too far out of the boundaries of how they're seen?
That could be, yeah.
Because I remember so clearly whenever I would tell my mother that I never got sick, it would make her very angry. And I think that was because she saw herself and she saw my whole family line as these sickly people. And so it
Mm.
scared her to see me stepping out of that familial tribal
Oh,
boundary.
absolutely. And I think that's true in friendships and many things. And that's why you talk about growing together or growing apart. And I don't remember who to attribute this to, but I heard this analogy many years ago. And it's about who you share your dreams with.
Mm,
And you have dolphin friends in your life and you have shark friends in your life. They're both friends, they both love you. But dolphins, when there's an injury, they surround you to protect you. So your dolphin
mm,
friends will see those dreams. They'd be excited, Pete, that you never get sick. They would be focusing on what you want in your life. Where your shark friends, they come from a fear base. So it might be that they're trying to protect you by telling you not to go for your dreams. And they may say it in a way that sounds very negative, but it's because they're afraid that if you try something and you fail, you're going to get too hurt. Or they're afraid that they can't do it themselves. They're too afraid to take that step, that they want to keep you contained into where they're comfortable. And I think a lot of times we think, well, that's a mean person for doing that. And it can sound mean, but a lot of times it's their way of showing their love. It may not be a healthy way to show it, but I do think a lot of our shark friends truly do love us. They just don't, they're not ready for us to move on, or they're afraid for us to move on.
that's so true. And I remember one of the hardest things one of my therapists once told me was that my abuser had done the very best they could at that moment.
Yeah.
And that's a hard thing to realize, but I really do believe we're all acting from our highest best self that we have accessible.
I remember a gentleman that I follow, and he's in social justice work, Brian Stevenson, and he's a Black lawyer who's been working in the prison system for 30 years. He's like, he's met people in jail who have done heinous things and need to be there. And yet, when you hear their backstory, you can have mercy for them. And so that's one of my values is compassion. It's not about being okay with what happened, but if I knew somebody's backstory, I can probably have compassion for what led them to abusing you or led them to doing something, you know, horrible to me. Does again, no excuses. There's consequences to that kind of behavior, but I can find some compassion along the way.
Right. And I just went through this thing where I am able to forgive somebody for something they did to somebody else. And what I discovered in that, I wasn't holding back forgiveness for them. I was holding back forgiveness of my own guilt and shame that I
Mm,
hadn't protected this other person. So it had nothing to do with either of them. It had to do with my own displaced guilt and shame of how I hadn't been the savior and stepped in and kept everybody safe, which was
yeah,
my job, right?
yeah. And forgiveness, I mean, that's a whole other topic. And certainly there's strong opinions on that. But for me, it goes back to not even necessarily forgiving the person, but it's releasing it from myself.
Mm.
So I can forgive. That person may never be in my life again, but in order for me to move on, it's more about forgiving for myself. But I can totally see what you're talking about because I tend to be that protector kind of person too. And nobody's going to get hurt on my watch, people.
Right, exactly. My mama bear is very strong and always watching.
Yeah.
I love that. Yeah, so I see that how forgiveness can actually be one of the most selfish, which I don't mean
Yeah.
that a bad way, but one of the most
Right.
selfish things you can do because it's how you empower yourself, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
I love that. So, in your business, what are things for you, Carolyn, or Carol, I'm sorry, that you feel are not allowing you to have as much of an impact or maybe grow your audience or maybe you're happy where you are. I don't know. Let me not speak for you.
Uh, I am happy where I am, and I'm also excited about growing and moving forward too. So I would say for me, I get stuck on the time of the reality or unreality of it's going to take too much time to grow bigger and that kind of thing. So I use that as an excuse and
Hmm.
just get to busy work instead of the bigger pictures kind of
So
thing.
so for you, it's about scalability.
Yeah.
Like how do I take one Carol? I don't want to keep calling you Carolyn. How do I take one Carol and get her to
My
be
middle
this?
name is Lynn, so you could
Oh,
be
maybe that's what
Carolyn.
it is. Maybe I'm downloading that. But so how does this one person do all these different things? And I there's probably a fear that you won't be of the same value level
Right.
if you
It's the
disperse further.
responsibility. Yeah, it's the
Ah,
responsibility part.
gotcha. So even if you had the best team on the world, you might still feel that your client was being disserviced because they didn't get as much of you as they would have if you were smaller, you think?
Probably because even when I said earlier about positive focus, I want to have that personal touch.
Hmm.
So, and there's just so much persons I can touch, I guess.
Yeah, and I guess that's why you see that struggle. I think a lot of times in coaches as they go from one to one to few, then one to many. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
You see their touchability decrease to a smaller and a smaller subset of people, and yet they also serve more people too. You know what I
right.
mean? So that's a fine line, I imagine, to have to flow along.
Yeah, and I am getting ready to launch a new program that will be about group service. And so it's really being about actually sharing that new opportunity. I'm very excited about it, but again, it's that losing that one-on-one connection kind of thing. So it'll be
Ooh.
interesting.
Yeah, because that will grow you, right?
Yeah,
And how you show up in whatever format, even in a recorded format, however you show up is the transformation that the client will receive
right.
too. Do you believe that?
I do believe that. Yeah.
Oh, I'm so excited, Carol. You're about to go worldwide.
Yay!
Yay, that is so exciting. Well, awesome. Well, is so what is something that you would say to the person who is just feeling perhaps their life is going well, by the outside, and everybody keeps telling them, you've got this, and they just don't feel like they're even worthy of they wake up every day and like, why me? How did I, or what I
Yeah.
mean? What would you say to this person?
I think the challenge is, and again, it was for me as well. We want a quick fix. And can you shift quickly? Certainly. But I think the majority of us, it's a process to change from I'm not worthy to I'm confident in my self-worth. So it's about practicing those affirmations. It's about catching. When I first start working with somebody, I ask them, I mean, just pay attention to what you're saying to yourself. I don't want you to beat yourself up over it. I don't want you to even shift. I want you to pay attention to the words you're using, the thoughts you're thinking about yourself, and the actions you're taking about yourself, because the awareness allows you to make those changes. And I think that we get on autopilot so easily that we're not even aware of what we're thinking and speaking about ourselves. And this is kind of an example that wasn't about myself, but it was something that I would say well, I guess in some aspects it is about myself. I cannot throw well. If I try to throw a ball, it's going to land about 10 feet in front of me. That's just truth. But I said for many, many years until I actually saw a Dove commercial like 3 years ago, or maybe 4 years ago, I throw worse than a girl. Girls don't throw bad, but I had that. Like, even when I said it, I wasn't thinking that I was putting down other girls and women by saying it. It was just, I throw worse than a girl. So I think when we're paying attention to what we say and what we think, then we're realizing it, catching it, and shifting it. Not,
Mhm.
it's easy to beat yourself up over not feeling good enough or not feeling worthy enough, but that's keeping you in that energy of unworthiness. When you start catching yourself, pat yourself on the back that you realize that you were calling yourself. I don't even like using the STUPID word, but a lot of people call themselves that, or they're I am this. and a lot of negativity behind the I am. They are affirming what they don't like about themselves. Um, I certainly can still affirm what I don't like about myself, but I catch it and I shift it and I move forward. So I think for me, especially when you're in that place of not feeling good about yourself, you want a quick fix. And I don't know of one. So it's really about being gentle with yourself, reframing it when you catch yourself speaking poorly, do affirmations, do something kind for yourself every day, and really celebrate your successes, even if it's the smallest thing. If you're really in a hard place in your life and maybe it's grief and getting out of bed that day is hard and you get out of bed, that's a celebration.
Hmm.
Maybe that day you need to stay in bed all day, and that's the day you don't beat yourself up for not getting out of bed. It's about being gentle and taking that one step further. And the more you practice it, you're going to realize in maybe even a few weeks, a month or so, that you're going to start feeling a little bit better. Does unworthiness go away completely? I don't think so, but I do think it doesn't run your life.
Mm, I love that. And what you were talking about really made me think of an experience I had where I always thought that it was hard for me to remember things, even though I have like a math degree and all this stuff. And I was listening to Jim Quick, KWIK, and he was talking about how he had a brain in injury, and he learned to have memory simply by telling himself that he could remember. So I started to just do that. I started to tell myself I have a good memory. And before I knew it, I started to
Yeah.
remember strings of numbers and things of this nature. Because, it takes you a long time to get where you are. And that's why it takes time to get back to somewhere else, because you built that up.
Yeah, it wasn't like you one day said, I'm not good enough. You've been saying it or hearing it for probably many, many years. So it really is about retraining and shifting it. And when you're just talking about the affirming that I have a good memory, something that I would encourage people to think about with affirmations, because an affirmation is just a statement. It's not right, wrong, good, or bad. It can be a positive affirmation or it can be a negative affirmation.
Mm,
But even your affirmation is I remember things. What did you say you started saying?
I
I
have a
have a
good
good.
memory.
So if I said I have a good memory, but 3 hours ago I could not remember what I had for breakfast, so I immediately say, no, I don't have a good memory, then that positive statement is not going to be as big of a service for you. It can be a stretch from where you're at, but you still want to believe it in some aspect. So I would either do I'm in the process of believing I have a good memory or shift it into something that I can believe. But if you negate, even if it's a positive affirmation, you negate it for you, it's not positive for you.
Yeah, because I had to exercise faith in it, because this is when I
Yes.
was a car salesman, and you'd have to remember a stock number to maybe go get the keys in the office. And what I would do is either snap a picture of it or write it down. So when I started telling myself I had a good memory, I was like, if I have a good memory, I'm not going to take a picture or write
Mm,
down the number. So I had to have
yeah.
the faith that I
Yeah.
would remember the stock number by the time I got to the office. And I did it with one. I was like, okay, now I need to do it with 2 cars and 3 cars. And I got to where I could do it with like 5 or 6 cars.
Nice.
But it was a faith muscle of, because my immediate response was to take a picture
Yeah.
or to write it down. And I had to like, okay, let's exercise this belief. You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
it really is. It's like exercising your memory muscle, exercising your positivity muscle. We exercise our negativity muscles pretty easily. Well, they say that the majority of us have a negative aspect, that's our autopilot is negative, and it's been a survival mode. So some people are born that are just naturally more positive, and most people need to work a little bit more to be more positive than negative. And again, it's not a right or wrong. For me, it's who do you want to be and how do you want to show up. If you want to be the grumpy old man, more power to.
I love that. Well, Carol, this has been just amazing. I'm so excited about all the things you're bringing out to the world. Do you have any final words for our guests today?
I guess for me, it's really about being gentle with yourself, because the ease when we think about other people being hard on us, and we tend to be our worst enemies. So if you have somebody in your life that is challenging and difficult and hard on you, and there's certainly Many of us have somebody like that, but then ask yourself, how do you treat yourself? And be gentle with yourself and just take one step forward. You don't have to take a giant leap. You don't have to go 500 miles today, just one step forward. And I promise you, the more you practice it, the quicker you're going to see where you're going and being able to feel a little bit better about it.
That is beautiful. So I'm going to have the links to contact Carol and find out about her new exciting things that are coming up so that you can have transformation and believe in yourself, because we believe in you. And Carol, thank you so much for being on the show today. You're so amazing. And we'll talk
Thanks,
at you
Pete.
later.
It was wonderful.
Bye. Yes. Bye.